Okay, let me get it set up on my phone. We're going to start in about 1.5 to 2 minutes, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Oh,
Good to
Hello.
see you. Thank you for joining us. Be safe out there on the road. I know it's a busy day over there at Ole Miss.
Yeah, we're out of school. You probably see me in the meeting twice because I have my computer on at home. I had to run and pick up my grandkids, so I'm in my truck too.
Oh,
So
I
once
hear that.
I change to my computer once I get back home.
Okay. All right. Sure thing. All right. Are we ready, everyone?
yes. This is expected to go until what time?
It's a mini webinar, so I'm trying to keep this right at an hour.
Okay, because I have a student right at 5, so I may jump off at like 4:58.
Okay, yeah, we're going to try to be straight to the point. All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, and I thank you for joining us for the second series or the second segment in my May Points to Ponder series. Today, our topic is preparing the junior and senior recital, tips for applied instructors and music majors. And I'm so excited to have some guest panelists on with us today. We have Dr. Myron Brown, we have Professor Ricky Burkhead, as well. We have some other panelists that may be joining us later. And our guest panelist for today is Mr. James Holden. Okay, so we're going to talk about some tips and strategies for applied instructors and music majors as we prepare our junior and senior recitals and capstone performances. So thank you all for being with us. Thank you for joining us to our guests on Zoom and to those who are tuning in on Facebook Live. Again, this is a mini webinar, so this should be at about 1 hour or less in this May series. So we're going to get started. Dr. Brown, starting with you, if you could briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are now.
Hello, I am Dr. Myron Brown. I am a pianist from Birmingham, Alabama. I completed my bachelor's degree in piano performance at the Birmingham Southern College. I earned a master's at University of Houston and my doctorate at University of Cincinnati, all in piano performance. And I am now at Winston-Salem State University, where I have been since 2010. I'm serving as the Department of Music chair. And I've done my fair share of recitals, both as a soloist and a collaborative artist with soloists and ensembles. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Burkhead, if you would give us a little bit of information about yourself. You're on mute.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ricky Burkhead. I'm at the University of Mississippi. And before that, I was at the University of, Mississippi Valley State University for 9 years, and I've just completed my 27th year here at the University of Mississippi. I attended undergrad at Mississippi Valley State, and also we got a master's in percussion performance from Eastern Illinois University. I enjoy teaching, and it's a pleasure to be on with you guys today to share anything that I can and also answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Holden, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, my name is James Holden. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. I attended Jackson State University, also attended North Texas State University, and I'm presently the director of band here at Virginia State University, and I play saxophone, the best instrument in the band.
Thank you so much. And our other panelist, Dr. Daryl Singleton, thank you for joining us. Please tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. One of our regents came by and I couldn't put him off. Yeah, I'm sure everybody on the call understands that. My name is Daryl Singleton, like she said. My undergraduate degree is from Howard University in music education. My master's degree is from Florida State in percussion performance. And my doctorate is in music education from Boston University. I have primarily been a band director, but I've also taught theory and taught percussion at University of District of Columbia, also Grambling State University, which is where I met first Ricky Burkhead, and then also here at Texas Southern University. And as the other panelists mentioned, I've done recitals, I've coached recitals, I've watched recitals, I've been all around recitals. So I'm looking very forward to anything that we can do to help people express themselves in the best way possible.
Indeed, thank you. And for those of you, if this is your first time joining and have not heard a lot about me, I received my undergraduate degree from Virginia State University in music education, my master's of music education from Norfolk State University, and my PhD in music education from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I've been teaching for 17 years on a K-12 and higher ed level. Currently, I am teaching at an international baccalaureate high school in Nevada, and I serve as the president and CEO of Prodigious Music Concepts, LLC, where we provide music instruction, educational consulting, and professional development services, and other professional tutoring services for K-12 educators, music majors, and higher ed music students, faculty, staff, and administrators. So again, thank you for joining us. We're going to jump right into our discussion. Okay, so, and we'll go around the room. In your own words, describe the role of the junior and senior recital. We'll start with Dr. Brown. You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So I think the role of a senior recital should be a capstone culminating experience for any music major. It should be to present a diverse program of music for public performance that requires students to combine the skills that they've learned in all the other courses in the curriculum. So everything you've learned in your applied lessons and your ensembles in history and theory and piano, you're putting all these skills together to not only entertain, but to educate and to show what you've accomplished in 4 or 5 or 6 years of college. You have to also keep everything at a professional level and remember the historical as well as the current performance practice trends so that you are presenting music in the style that the composer would have wanted it presented in. A junior recital should really be the same thing, but maybe a stepping stone to the senior recital in terms of length or level of difficulty of the repertoire, just so you're not jumping into the deep end at once. The junior recital is like stepping into the shallow end of the pool and continuing to grow until you can handle the deep end.
Thank you. Very well put. Dr. Singleton, would you like to add to that?
Yes, the only thing I might have a different perspective on is, at least in our curriculum here at Texas Southern University, since music education majors, the only people that are required to do a junior recital are performance majors, right? So for those performance majors, yes, it is jumping into the shallow end of the pool, but not so much because it's shallow, but because you need to get deeper. So whereas a music education major in their senior recital has to jump into, if we're going to use the pool, if we're going to continue the pool analogy, if that music education major is jumping into the middle part of the pool, right, because they're not a performance major, so they may not be in that, the high dive into the pool, right? But that's where the junior recital would step in, and I would even go as far as to say that those semester recitals, depending on what you call it, whether seminar class and those things, for me, those would be the shallow end, right? And then the recital you're going to be in deep water regardless. It's just a matter of how tall you are based on whether you're a performance major or a music ed major. And then that senior recital for the performance major is, that's swimming the English Channel kind of stuff,
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Holden, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I guess, both Singleton and Brown have said a whole lot on that. But one thing about it is that I like to see when you prepare a recital, do touch base on some of the things that you covered during the regular your semester school year, and have a variety of selection on your program. You must do that because you just can't focus in on one particular period. So I like to cover different variety of music and different period on our program. So I agree with what everyone else said.
Indeed, talking about the importance of the recital as being a capstone project, but then having stepping stones to that. For performance majors, maybe that stepping stone is a junior recital, in addition to your semester recital hours of seminar classes that you've taken since freshman year. And of course, for the education majors, because we're on a different kind of end of the spectrum, we're jumping in, the recital is important, but maybe some different components should be, a part of this, to make sure that we're still fulfilling our requirements as a music major and giving us a variety of things that we can showcase all of our skills. Thank you. When we're talking about our applied instructors, a lot of the times, just in my experience as an applied instructor, or in my experience as in my experience as, just watching recitals, adjudicating juries, a lot of the things that I have found is that we tend to want to use the same program that we've seen another school use, or we're kind of measuring our programs based on another program's curriculum. We're comparing our institution to what other institutions do for their clarinet players, their saxophone players, their trumpet players, and we're not always familiar with what we should be doing to help our students prepare for the recital. So thinking from the applied instructor's perspective, what should we consider as an applied instructor when we're helping our students? And I think a lot of times we want to do it for our students, but I feel we should be helping our students to prepare for their own recital. In my take, I feel they should have some say or some input in what they're doing. But as an applied instructor, starting with Dr. Singleton, what should we be doing to help our students prepare for their recitals?
So I thought it was very good that you mentioned that they should have some agency. One of my education heroes is Pablo Freire, who wrote a book entitled Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And he talks a lot in that book that we often deposit into our students without considering where they are and what they want to do and what they need. So what I like to do is I think of it as we're scaffolding them between where they are and where they need to be. One of the practices that, and I got this from one of my mentors, even on the semester basis when they're picking their seminar, their solos for seminar and for jury, I allow them to go out and find some solos, right? I know what they need from a skill standpoint, and I make them bring me a choice. I have them bring me a choice, and then from what they've selected, I find which one is most appropriate. And if none of them are appropriate, then yes, I'll steer them in another direction. But then they have that type of agency, and they feel good about it. Because another thing is our education process, the whole goal is to get them ready for a professional career. And if I know that a student wants to be an orchestral player, or that they have the potential to be an orchestral player, then yes, I'm going to be a lot more standardized in what I suggest. But if I know this student may not be doing that, or they might just want a career as a recitalist, then let's find some things that's going to showcase, let them find some ways to express themselves. So I think that we need to help guide them, make sure they're aware of what they need skill-wise, what they need repertoire-wise, as far as what, if they're going to grad school. That's another thing that comes into play. So I think it's going to vary, but I think that that's our responsibility to kind of look down the road. Prayerfully, we've been there already ourselves, right? Or at least have the wisdom and humility to reach out to somebody that has, if we haven't been there personally, and make sure that they have stepping stones to get them where they need to be, not just where we've seen other people go.
Indeed. And I think you made a very good point there when you were mentioning just knowing where they need to be skill-wise and being able to communicate that to them. A lot of the times, students don't understand why they have to do a recital, let alone why they have to perform certain music. And I remember, just being in an evaluation, it's not just about you understanding, or, we always spend a lot of time on when will the teacher know the student has mastered the content. The question we forget to ask is, how will the student know when they've mastered the content? How will they know that they've mastered this and they understand this? Same with the recital. I think that they would understand it a little bit better and perform better and select music with a clearer mindset if they knew why they had to perform the recital to begin with, and why certain repertoire is expected or required based on where they're trying to get to. Are they trying to go to grad school? Are they trying to audition for an orchestral symphony? Are they trying to audition to play for Fantasia or TLC? I think that we need to help them to play relevant things that would help get them to where they're trying to go in their big end, their end game for their career. So I definitely appreciate you saying that. Dr. Brown, would you like to add to that?
Sure. A lot of what I was going to say has already been said. I like how you, as well as Professor Singleton, have said that it's good to give the student some choice. But when it comes to applied instructors and music students, we have a similar influence that parents have over their children. We know what's good for them, and we know what they need, even when they don't yet know what they need. Many music students come into college with a very limited knowledge of music, and I'm speaking of 21st century music students. This day and age, we don't often get the student who studied piano or violin since age 4 and has already done concertos and competitions. We get students who may have had some high school or middle school band or choir, or maybe they sing at church or they taught themselves to play keys. So as the experts, I think the students have to trust that we know what's best for them, even though it may not be something they like. We might give them a Bach prelude and fugue because I know you need a better understanding of counterpoint and multiple voices happening at once. But I do like the option of giving students several choices of pieces that can enhance the same skill. When it comes to preparing a recital, I think the teacher should balance what the students need with some of the students' interests. As has been said before, not everyone wants to be a recitalist or an orchestral musician. So we as educators, we should also be careful that we embrace other genres that are often considered not academic or not professional. We've got to embrace R&B, spirituals, gospel, jazz, music theater, because if the truth be told, if we look at those genres of music and their audiences, at least prior to COVID-19, we can see kind of what the involvement is versus a classical audience. So we've got to prepare our students for their futures, not for our futures.
Indeed, very, very good points, very good points. And Dr. Cordelia Anderson, you joined us at just the right time. This is our final panelist joining us today. Dr. Cordelia Anderson is a professor of music at Alabama State University, and you're coming in at the right time. I would like for you to add to what Dr. Brown said, because this is something you mentioned in a previous webinar we did in April about choosing and diversifying the repertoire. The question is, what should we consider as applied instructors when helping our students prepare for the junior and senior recitals? Would you like to give input on that?
Yes, hello everybody. Please excuse my tardy as I am leaving for a lesson, but I'm Dr. Cordelia Anderson from the Alabama State University. And some of the things that I believe that we can help with our students, you said preparing for recitals. A
Yes.
lot of it deals with, I would say, foundational. How are we starting them with the foundational repertoire, foundational techniques, something that they can have substantial growth from to get them to the recital? So it's all about from the first lesson, day one, as a freshman, till you reach the junior recital. What are you doing? What is the step process? How are you foundationally preparing them for that process? So I say it starts at day one. It starts, what foundational techniques are you giving them? What are you talking about the first lesson? Do you talk about going right into music, or are you talking about breathing? It's step one. Those things that'll lead you into picking the right repertoire for that student, for them to eventually get to the point of being able to produce a good, solid junior recital. And then after from that, to grow even more, to produce the senior recital.
Thank you. And that, I think that leads, we're going to go a little off script, but that leads right into a very important question. A lot of the times, and I mentioned this in my response before, is that if we clearly articulate to our students what is expected of them for their capstone requirements, for their recital, is going to lead to more musical and academic success as they matriculate through the program. They're going to take their applied lessons more seriously. Right now, we have a generation of students, even when I was in undergrad, where we don't understand, why do we have to go to jury? I can count, numerous times where I showed up to jury and we had to write no show or NS on the score sheet because students simply didn't show up, and they didn't understand that atmosphere of performing for jury, performing on recitals throughout the semester, and not waiting for the marathon recital at the end of the semester. They're not understanding how that leads up. Those are the stepping stones, or those shallow end experiences you need in the pool in order to be able to dive right into the deep end later. A lot of the times, people feel like we're going to be blessed with the osmosis to scramble in our last semester before student teaching, and all of a sudden we're going to be blessed with the gift to just play, as if we're watching the movie Soul, and we're just going to be able to go right at it and be this phenomenal musician on stage. We're not taking into account that we're not familiar with the literature. We're not familiar with compositions of that time period. We're not familiar just with the agility of our instrument or the level of stamina it takes, and performance anxiety that comes from improper preparation. a lot of the times we may have performed it well in rehearsal and we're not ready for that level of stage fright or that level of stardom, that comes with the senior recital and the pressure that comes with it. So I agree, understanding from day one, freshman year, fall semester, what is required of me in these applied lessons? What am I required to do each week? And how is this going to get me to my end goal? But in addition to that, we have to take into account that students are coming in as music majors and they may have never had a private lesson in high school or middle school. They may have never played with an accompanist, especially if they weren't pushed to go to solo and ensemble. Yet we're throwing them on a stage and say, here, play with an accompanist. You're supposed to automatically know etiquette about how to take a bow, how high your stand is supposed to be on stage, how to dress on stage, how to acknowledge your accompanist, how to recover, how to cue your accompanist in, how to cut your accompanist off, how to breathe together, nonverbal communication. So these are things that should be covered freshman year, first semester, before you play a note. And then before we talk about literature, we should start with scales and breathing and a method book, because 9 times out of 10, we're still getting music majors that may come in and the only 4 scales they know as an instrumentalist are concerts B flat, E flat, A flat, and F. Yet we're giving them a solo that's in the key of E or in the key of C. We're talking to vocal majors who the only thing they've sung is in church, and we're expecting them to be able to properly dictate Italian, French, German, let alone read it and know what it means, and then be able to translate it. If we talk about the importance of translation and research ahead of time, when they go and they learn that that song is about love or heroism or great loss, then they're going to project that performance on stage. You can't go in singing, about love and loss as if you're happy because you didn't research the background of your song. So I feel that's very important as well. So those are some things that applied instructors should consider when we're preparing our students for the junior and senior recital. Mr. Holden, what should we consider now on the student side? What should we really consider as music majors when we're preparing for our junior and senior recital?
Repeat that question again.
What should we consider as music majors, as the student? What should we think about and consider as we're preparing for our own junior or senior recital?
Well, one thing here again, you have to make sure that these students cover a great amount of repertoire as they and be prepared for the junior and senior recital. Now, I just want to touch base a little bit what they said early is that the fundamental is very important. Now, I worked on fundamental for a long time the first semester, and we just work on maybe 2 or 3 notes. That's going from one note to the next note, just the feel of it going from one note to the next and what it sounds like. The other thing too, I came from the school of the universal method book, the method books that I always use for saxophone and clarinet, H. Close, a clarinet book. And I grew up with those particular books. So when I came to my undergrad school at Jackson State University, I was prepared. However, I was going to be a biology major. That's what I wanted to go into biology. But I received a scholarship. But before I got to school, I knew my major scales. I knew arpeggios. I knew solo material. So when I entered the school, it wasn't new for me to go on stage. I had some experience with that. So therefore, the students going on stage is very important, and you need to teach them at the very beginning. So that's how I learned at the very beginning as a freshman year. My freshman year, I never forget, we was on the quarter system. So the second quarter, I was on the radio playing for a recital series, and I got a chance to see one outstanding player that was Cannonball Adderley. That changed my whole world. When I saw him perform, that was it. It was on for me to practice. Now talking to Cannonball, and Alvin Baptiste, practice was very essential to grow as a musician and prepare for your recital and program. So I think practicing is one of the key to all of this. Practice, practice, and practice, and more practice until you get it right. And again, here, preparing for your senior recital, it requires a lot of practicing, to achieve your goal.
Thank you. Professor Burkhead, I know we've talked to our other panelists as far as it relates to general instrumentalists and vocalists, but from a percussionist standpoint as well, because a lot of the times we get up there with our one instrument and we have to play or we have to sing and that's it. Percussion majors and piano majors, I have a lot of respect for them because piano majors 9 times out of 10 have to memorize all of their repertoire for the stage. They don't have the luxury of having someone turn sheet music for them. And so we have to think about that as well. We talk about marching band memorizing music, but you're talking about memorizing 6, 7-page works. So Professor Burkhead, talk to us from a percussion and a total percussionist perspective of what students should consider and applied instructors should consider when preparing the senior recital or the junior recital, because it's more than just playing on snare drum.
You're right.
Oh, there's some back there.
Can you hear me okay?
It's some static coming through. Oh, did we lose him?
You're right about that.
There we go.
A lot of the great things that have been said so far is the fact that you got to start with fundamentals. So technique is important. Skills is a part of that. The method books, and then the repertoire. That's up to the teacher to get that done. Like if students come in and they don't have a good foundation, because some people choose music because they can't do anything else. And sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. Many times we have to ask people to leave the program because they can't do anything else, but they don't do music very well either. So once you start in music, you have to be dedicated. And in percussion, you really have to, because you have several instruments to learn. So as my brother said just before, practice, 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 practice is important. Concerning a recital, like if you put all your stock in just that one performance that you're gonna have, chances are you can crash and burn and just have a total mental meltdown on that recital. So it's important for teachers to set up performance classes. And usually those things happen every week or every other week so that you play for people just in your area. So if it's percussion, you're playing for percussionists. So you can get used to performing in front of people so that when you do your recital, it's not that main or that big moment that you hope to have. And everything's supposed to go perfectly at that time, because it could be terrible. You've had some other experiences where you can have all the nerves and all those things to be worked out. If not, you can have a total meltdown.
Indeed. Could you talk to us also about just the multiple percussion that's required on stage, and just how important it is to give equal due respect to each of the instruments you have to play? I've seen percussion recitals where some of them have been very good. I've seen some percussion recitals where the snare piece was very good, but they bombed on timpani, or they get to the mallet percussion piece and not enough work has been done on mallet percussion, let alone multiple mallet percussion. So could you talk to us just a little bit about the importance of, balancing out the weight or balancing out the responsibility for percussionists as they prepare for their recital with their pieces?
Was that directed to me?
Yes.
Okay, good question. Did you hear my answer before? Because I was getting out of my truck and I went to my family.
Yes, we did.
All right. Yeah. So you get these students that sometimes they come to college and they only play mallets, like in the front ensemble, and they have limited snare or drumming chops. So you want to work on that. Or you get guys who play drums and they don't play much mallets. Now I've found that people that play drums can adapt to mallets pretty quick, but people who only play mallets and just don't play drums, it takes them a while to develop those skills because they've missed all those years of early development where they can develop their hands and the psychomotor skills to do so. And by that time, they're afraid of snare drum or anything to have to do with drums because they hadn't played it. So that fear causes them to think that they can't accomplish what they should. The snare drummer or the drumming guy, he's excited about playing mallets, so they pick it up, and they've heard music, so they bring those musical experiences into that. It's so important, if you don't have those skills in high school, that you work your butt off. When I went to college, I didn't play any mallets. I only joined the band in the 11th grade, and I played snare drum. My whole goal was to be a professional snare drummer. At the time, that was the thing. So I get to college, no teacher the first year, but I bought the 3 main books, just like we talked about the Universal Studies or the Alpen book. We had 3 main books, one for mallets, one for timpani, and one for snare drum. So one was by Saul Goodman, Method for Timpani, and then the other 2 were by Goldenberg for snare drum and mallets. And I would have the band director let me to the band hall, go in there and start working on my own. And I had to take lessons from the department chair, and he had a good understanding about how you should play drums. It wasn't until my second year that I got a teacher, and that changed my life. So teachers are so important, how they take you and develop you and make you grow. But you got to put the time in.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Dr. Singleton, as a percussionist as well, and I know you've adjudicated so many percussionists to help with recitals, could you add to that as well as the importance of just how percussionists should prepare for their recitals and the importance of varying the repertoire so that it really showcases the skill of a percussionist? A lot of the times in my experience adjudicating recitals, my experience has been a lot of times that our percussionists play it safe, or that the applied instructor plays it safe. And sometimes it's because it's harder sometimes to staff a full-time percussion instructor than it is some of the other faculty members at our institutions. Could you add to that?
Sure. And actually, what I'm about to say, it doesn't just apply to percussion, it applies to everything. And what I want to talk about real quick is the organization of the practice time leading up to the recital. Uh, when I prepared for some recitals I did when I was at Grambling as an adult, my approach was so much different than it was as a student. One of the pitfalls I found are students that prepare one piece before they move on to the next piece. That's a big pitfall, uh, because you never know what challenges that next piece might provide. And now you're closer to the recital date, and now you get into that whole panic and meltdown mode that Burkhead was talking about, right? So that's the first thing. I call it spiral practicing, that you're practicing all the pieces to get them all moving in the same direction. And also to recognize that some of them you will be better at, right? And so don't spend as much time on the things that you're really, really good at when you need to be putting that time in on something else. Now, this obviously applies to percussion in the case of that mallet player, that person comes from front ensemble to college and never played drums, right? And so that applies to that person, that they don't spend so much time playing mallets, and they've got 7 mallet pieces and 2 drum pieces, and all the mallet pieces are going great, but then you don't have these other 2 pieces together because you put them off, which is something that you mentioned, right? So I advocate just a spiral practice thing where you make sure everything is moving along. Another thing I found very, very helpful to me is that I took my pieces, and I tell my students all the time, a lot of times I practice with a pencil before I pick up a mallet, right? And what I mean by that for a percussionist, what I'm talking about is organizing tuning changes, organizing mallet changes, organizing how things are going to go. Because a lot of times for us, it's not that it's hard to do, is getting your mind to when it's supposed to happen. But I'm also talking about putting it on a calendar. I had a calendar on my wall, and I had each piece broken down where I need to be by such and such a date on each piece, so that by X date I can play through everything. By X date I'm tweaking. By X date I'm ready for the recital. So that organization is so important. Another thing I would say for everybody is don't wait to get with your accompanist. And I think that was mentioned before, but as I remember when I was in high school, every time I learned a solo and I'd be great, and then that first rehearsal with the accompanist, it's like you feel like you don't even know the piece anymore. So you need to make sure, but all of that is about organization of that practice time. Another thing, and I'm gonna let it go, is making sure that you use your practice time, because in a lot of our situations, our kids work, they do all these other things. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids at our schools do not have the 4 to 6 hours to put in that they need to have. So what I tell them all the time is, even if you've got 10 minutes, you need to know what the next 10 minutes need to be spent on. If all you have is 10 minutes waiting for a class, then you might not be able to practice everything, but you can practice these 2 measures. You can work on that one lick, or you can analyze something to figure out what it is, so that you don't have to read it every time, because you already figured out it was a scale. Oh, it's in the key of E flat. It just happened to start on A flat. So it's really just a mode, and instead of reading it every time, you've already got it straight. So I could go on all day about that, but I'm gonna unplug right there and let you take it on to the next person.
But that was some really good things. You mentioned some key points about planning out the recital, and that's good for any person, regardless of your background. That's even good beyond the applied lesson. That's good for our larger ensembles as well. That's good for our small chamber ensembles. Going in with a plan, knowing what you're going to do at every stage of rehearsal, making sure that your practice time is efficient, well thought out, and that you have a goal. You have a goal for what you want to work on. That way, it goes back to what I said earlier. How will you know when you've accomplished what you're set out to accomplish if you didn't have a plan to begin with? How will you know that you've reached it to that mark of what your stopping point is if you didn't have a plan to begin with? But also working all of your pieces a little bit at a time to get them in rotation, get them under your belt. Don't just work up one piece and have your opening be your strongest and then you bomb out until the closing. So that's very important too, is starting on each piece, finding out where those challenges are. I love how you mentioned score study or studying your piece and using that pencil to go through the key changes, identifying patterns that repeat and things like that. Identify, okay, this is nothing but a chromatic scale. With clarinet pieces, it looks like an ink blot test half the time because there's nothing but dots on the page. But a lot of times, if you go through and you synthesize it, you can take the panic away from it being 16th notes and 32nd notes and say, hey, that's nothing but the chromatic scale, or that's nothing but the B flat scale. Okay, so I definitely appreciate that. You also led into something that I want to direct to Dr. Brown, because Dr. Brown, you've accompanied so many people in individual recitals, group recitals, IMA conferences, and things like that. At what stage in the process should we communicate with our accompanists, and how important is this relationship to the overall goals and success of our students?
Okay, I am happy to answer that, but let me first say this. A pianist is an equal partner in the interpretive process. Full stop. I'm gonna let that marinate.
Mm-hmm.
So as pianists, I did study with a teacher at the Cincinnati Conservatory. When it comes to the accompanist, she would call it the A word, because often the term accompanist comes with a negative connotation, as if you're the lesser than. Your program, your name on the recital program is 10 times smaller than the other person's, although you probably have 20 times more notes. So, but getting back to your question, it is imperative that applied teachers and applied students communicate with the accompanist at every step as soon as possible, because we're making music together. So we need to rehearse together. We need to practice performing together. Those goals that Professor Singleton talked about, we need to have those same goals collaboratively. By a certain date, we should be able to put these sections of the piece together. When it comes to planning out music, as soon as a student has something, the accompanist should know what the repertoire is, and either the student should provide a copy, or maybe the accompanist will already have their copy. Recital dates, jury dates, audition dates, rehearsal dates, all of these things should be done in consideration of the pianist and his or her schedule. It is a gross disrespect to all pianists over the world when we've learned a recital and a student does not do their part to prepare the recital by the proposed date. Then all of our time has gone to waste. It also is a gross disrespect when students or teachers have to change repertoire for whatever reason. So out of respect, when all possible, once the plan has been established, you should stick with it. In the case of instrumental music, especially, as a pianist, usually instrumental music is a lot more challenging to learn than some of the vocal repertoire. So in those situations, it's even helpful if the professor would give the pianist the music a semester or even a year in advance, maybe for those advanced concertos that your student is working towards. I would appreciate things that I can work on either over the summer or over the winter break, so that when the semester starts, I am ready to give the student the full support that he or she needs. I could say so much, but I'm going to let somebody else talk.
No, but that was great input, great input. But I will also, you mentioned something about, the communication between the applied instructor and the pianist as well, the accompanist as well. And I feel that's so important because, one, not only do we need to make sure that we are courteous of your time and the dedication is going to take, we have to be mindful that it takes you a certain time to prepare the music as well. And we just can't be thinking of it one-sided where it's going to take our students 6 months. It may take the accompanist that same amount of time to work that that piece up depending on how challenging it is, or what the changes are, or what's expected, or the number of pieces on the recital. But in addition to that, I will also say, a lot of the times, sometimes we're not fortunate enough to have a full-time accompanist in our departments or at our universities. Sometimes we're not fortunate enough to have a competent accompanist at our recital. So I think it is definitely up to the applied instructor, being like Dr. Singleton said, being that parent, being that, we know them better than, they know ourselves, they know themselves. I think it's very important that we know up front, before we place our students in that situation, whether or not the accompanist can handle the repertoire to begin with. We have to be very honest, very open, and very professional. And it's not about hurting feelings. It's about, hey, this is the repertoire that my student is performing. Is this something that you're comfortable with accompanying? Is this something that you have the time to accompany? A lot of times the accompanists are, in some instances, may not be fully aware of the obligations they have on their plate. So that conversation needs to take place early to decide, well, hey, I can use my department accompanist for this recital, or maybe I need to look outside and look at alternate options to make this recital happen. Is important for scheduling. And again, is about respect on both ends of the ball. With accompanists, the student must be prepared if the accompanist is putting in work. On the same token, and definitely speaking from personal experience, the accompanist has to be prepared. I remember it was a nightmare on the last piece of my senior recital. My accompanist did not take my recital seriously and bombed my last piece on the recital. It turned out to be a clarinet solo, a long 16 measure cadenza, because the accompanist was not prepared and it had not prepared the work. And what hurt even more was that she wasn't free. I paid her and it wasn't cheap. And so a lot of times, that's very important, to consider as well on all ends of the gamut, the skill level, the comfort level, and the availability. Is this something they can handle, especially when you have 6 and 7 recitals in the same semester and everyone's gunning for the same accompanist? So definitely appreciate you with those points and words of wisdom. Now, moving on, and this is for,
Can you hear me? Can you hear?
This is for Dr. Anderson. How important, or what should we consider? Because vocalists, a lot of times, instrumentals, we don't have to do this, but vocalists usually have program notes in their recital programs. What should we know and consider about program notes?
I had already had my hand up actually to kind of piggyback on what you were saying about the accompanist. Can I say a little bit of that?
Yes.
And then I'm going to go into the program notes?
Yes, you can.
I wanted to say, and I said it in the chat, so I don't know if you saw it, but I like to build that relationship with the accompanist early on in lessons, if we can do that, if it's possible. And luckily here at Alabama State University, we've been able to do that. And so it gives the student a little bit more time to begin that process. And then it becomes a journey for them. So I just want to say, as a I think for the voice studio, I'm sure for other instruments as well, but it really works to have that accompanist to be able to schedule them to come to that lesson so they can see what the teacher is doing with the student. And also, if the student doesn't remember, the accompanist could take notes and remember and help them in another maybe rehearsal time or practice time. So I wanted to definitely say that. That's very helpful. But for program notes, it's so important because for vocalists, we are singing in foreign languages. And I know one of the questions later is about what would be appropriate to do foreign languages or to do different things. Foundationally, yes, because as a vocalist, that's what we do. We sing in foreign language. And so that has to be very clean and laid out in a program note. That process here at ASU is taken in a step-by-step process. We actually have a class geared to it because in the past, we would be chasing students down to get program notes at the last minute for their recital, because they've spent so much time preparing the music that they forget that they have to scholarly somewhat write about their music. So in lessons, and this is just because of my experience of working with my students, I start them early. What are we singing about? Word for word translations. We use leader.net. I introduce it to my students immediately. I'll put it in the chat box if people don't know about it. But I introduce it to them immediately because every song in foreign language, Italian, French, especially art songs, it's going to be in leader.net. They can easily pull the translations from that and then They have a literal translation, and then we do a subtext, meaning how do you see these words? What do they mean to you? So that you can then put that characterization into the music. So it's more than just finding what what it means, but then again, getting that personal, what would it mean to you? What would this say to you personally as a singer? And then be able to put that on the page, get it lined up, and be able to convey that on the stage. I don't know, a lot of people tend to read program notes in the middle of recitals. I'm not an avid fan of that because I like to enjoy what is actually happening on stage. But just to make sure that our students have a good foundation and an understanding of how to do that, we have set aside a class time here that meets once a week on a Thursday, and they sit with a teacher and they talk with them about what is appropriate for program notes. Do you put a bunch of things on there about the composer and their information and their history? No, nobody really cares about so much of that. They want to know the meat of the music. What are you singing about? What are the details that you're singing about? If it's an aria from an opera, what opera is it from? What is happening in the opera? What is happening the scene before you come in and after? What is the overall arc of the storyline? What is happening? So those are the things that we sit with them and we talk about what's important to put in those program notes and what's not so important. It shows that the students, it really helps them really learn the actual music itself and the actual text, whether it be poetry or libretto from an opera. And so we really sit with them and help them understand that you're not giving a history lesson. You're not giving a history lesson of who these composers are. You're giving a little snippet of that so that people can be aware, but you are giving them the meat and the potatoes of what you are performing. If you're a character, who you are, what's happening, how do you connect to this piece? And prayerfully, we can see that connection on the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. So very important. I definitely appreciate this talk. I know there's so many more things we could say, in this webinar. We have two final questions and be able to go around the room to all of our panelists with this question. But the biggest thing is, what is the, when we're talking about recitals, a lot of the times we may have pieces that require multiple performers, or you may need guest performers on stage with you. Is that allowed, or is that frowned upon? And if so, what is appropriate? How should they be staged if we have guest performers with us on stage? Sometimes we may have to have a percussion ensemble or a brass ensemble with us. And how do we, if we use guest performers, how do we keep the focus on our performance when we're using guest performers? I'll start with Professor Burkhead.
Thank you. One interesting point that was made early on, the fact that students spend 4, 5, 6 years in school. So for a junior recital, they're probably not doing it in their third year. They may be doing it their fourth or their fifth year. And then the senior recital after that. Here for our junior recital, you have to take at least 6 semesters of lessons before you pass out of lessons. So the recital could come later, you can take the class. The junior recital is mostly a joint recital. So it takes the pressure off that student at that level. So usually it's enough to fill up an hour between those two students. And if they have to bring on a percussion ensemble for a piece, it features that person. So that's a given right there. We only require one recital for music education majors before they graduate. So it could be, if you want to do it your junior year or your senior year, just one, because they're music education majors. So for the performance major, they have the option to do the junior and the senior. And so they're going to be doing that 45 to 50 to an hour recital to do so. And one word about accompanist. At the beginning of the semester, we have a person who is the instrumental accompanist, and there's some other people that can help carry the load. But she have to know the pieces at the beginning of the semester, and when she comes in to work with the students throughout so many dates before a jury recital performance or just a jury, she's going to coach that student. And she's a perfectionist, so she's pretty hardcore. And so it's going to be right when they come to play at the recital or in the jury. And the teacher can sit in those sessions too, or you can just leave them to that person. She's going to coach them through it. So it's going to be done.
Thank you. And I like what you said too. That may be something for us to consider as well, is giving our music ed majors the option to do their recital junior year, as opposed to trying to do their recital and student teach in their senior year. That can be hectic enough. So that may be a consideration that we may want to have with our departments as well, is giving our students the option. Do you want to prepare for this your junior year or your senior year? But still, of course, leave that, to the discretion of the applied instructor and the student to decide together as a collaborative unit. Dr. Brown, I know you have to get ready to leave soon. Would you mind chiming in on this question?
Sure. I like what has been said already, but to add to that, I think a career in music, unless you're a pianist, in most cases, you're going to be on stage with other musicians anyway. So I think it certainly makes sense to give our students solo repertoire as well as chamber music where they're involved in some ensemble. So in collaboration with the students and the teachers, we should try to choose pieces that either highlight or some way spotlight the student whose recital it is. And I think that's the most important thing. As far as them being on stage together, I think we can have different opinions about that. Some of them like to color coordinate, or some of them like to say everybody wear black and then the recitalist is in their flowing evening gown in a bright color or something. But I think the importance is that they learn how to collaborate with the pianist as well as learn how to collaborate with other small ensembles, because those who will have a career in performance or even a career in teaching or composing where they just perform sometimes, that ensemble is not always going to be just that student and piano. So that's a good experience.
Thank you. And while I have you before you go, would you want to go ahead and give any closing words now before you leave in reference to the recital and just the importance of preparing for our applied instructors and any music majors who may be listening?
Sure. And I saw 3 of my own students on the chat today, and you all know how to reach me. If y'all have any other questions, just hit me up. But there's a million things I could say, but one, I'll try to narrow it down to this. The senior recital is so much more than just a degree requirement. Depending on where you're going to go with your career, that can serve so many other purposes. Anyone who's going to graduate school, your senior recital may very well consist of your audition repertoire for graduate school. So applied teachers, we got to get to know our students. Those who have the ability or the interest to go on to graduate school, we should probably incorporate the typical master's degree requirements into their senior recital so they're not having to learn a separate program. You should give this recital at more than just your concert hall at your school. So my 2 students who are giving recitals, I won't call your names in this chat, but in your hometown, consider, once it's actually safe to do so after the pandemic, maybe at your local home church or a retirement community, an elementary school that you attended, go and give your recital to an audience that will be less pressure than your college classmates and your college professors. Singers may be considering auditioning for opera companies or a young artist company. Keep that in mind. Your recital might be your audition video. Those of you who want to go into performance or even commercial music, you might want to start a YouTube channel. Some of your senior recital repertoire may be part of your digital portfolio that you put on social media. So really take it serious. It's a lot more than just another check mark to get your degree. But this is presenting to the world that, hey, this is the culmination of 4 or 5 years of study. This is one thing that I have accomplished. I hope that answers your question, Dr. Brock.
Yes, and it was so profound. I really appreciate what you said, because you're going along the lines of why I do this to begin with, is to show students how what they do at point A freshman year carries through to how they're going to get through their career and go. It's all about that scaffolding and coming back around, that spiral learning and spiral growth, is that everything you do now sets you up to catapult you into your future. That was profound, and you touched on every area and every concentration. So it's something everyone could take away from that. So thank you so much. I will go now to Dr. Singleton, talking about guest performers, and also if you want to give your extra final thoughts as well.
Okay, as far as guest performers, the traditional way of thinking about it, and I kind of lean towards this, is that it is your senior recital. So you need to be the focus. However, that said, I can't help but think about the fact that this is off of a conservatory paradigm that goes back to the idea that everybody that goes to music school is studying to be a soloist, right? That's it. The root of everything that we're doing. You know, conservatories were not there for music ed majors, right? They were there for people that were being a soloist, that wanted to be a symphony player, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of want to throw that caveat out there that what a lot of times where people say, well, that's not senior recital level material, et cetera, that kind of needs to be taken with a grain of salt in a lot of situations, right? Because it has to do with what the goals are. Now, I get that now we go into a whole bunch of things about accreditation and all of that, but I just want to throw that out there that we're already basing this on something that it wasn't necessarily intended to be based upon. I wanted to get that out. Now, that said, as a percussionist, one of the things that I find is that unfortunately, drum set and hand drumming and things like that aren't traditionally included in recitals. I know I didn't have the opportunity to play drum set or hand drums on my senior recital, but I recognize that this is where what's something that the students need to be able to do. I mean, at the end of the day, the largest entity that employs live musicians is the church, you know, on a regular basis. So I want to make sure that my students are prepared for that. So I encourage them to play hand drums on a piece, and I know that is going to involve an ensemble. It's not about them being able to solo on congas, but can you play congas? Can you play in a situation? Because at the end of the day, your career is not going to be as a conga soloist. Your career is not going to be as a bongo soloist or even as a drum set soloist. Those jobs are for you to support another ensemble. So being able to demonstrate that you can do that, for me, does the job that should be done on a senior recital, as opposed to having to play some, you know, transcribe this Tony Williams solo and play it, you know, or you're not graduating. You know, I don't think that that's where it needs to be, right? So I'm all in favor of having other people, and I've even written pieces for my students that involved other ensembles, you know, so that they can do that, you know, especially in the drum set and in the hand drumming and world percussion thing. As far as my closing remarks, the only other thing that I want to throw out there for people is something that my mentor taught me to do, and he calls it reverse order rehearsal technique. And I use it for ensembles, I use it for marching band shows, but I also use it for learning a solo. And what that basically means is once I've gone through the piece, let's say a piece has 5 sections, A, B, C, and D. Once I've gone through those sections and I kind of have an understanding of the piece, I start my hard practice going from E to the end. Then I back up and I go from D to the end. And what it does is this. First off, I know we want the entire piece to be strong, but if I have to choose between the beginning to be the strongest or the end to be the strongest, I want the end to be stronger. Another thing it does is I get to relax as I go through the performance because I'm getting to more familiar territory. Another thing it does is a lot of times we have trouble with our transitions because we practice the A section, then we practice the B section, but it's always hard getting from A to B. If we've already done the other part to the end, I already know what's coming and I'm more likely to make that seamless. Another thing it does is it builds up your endurance as you go, because you start practicing here to the end, then from there to the end, and it increases all of that. And not just your physical endurance, but your mental endurance. And then finally, the other thing it does is it makes you practice going to the end, because we learn what we practice. And if we practice stopping at the end of a section, then we got to relearn how to go past that section to the next section. But if we practice all the way to the end, we're always going to the end, and that becomes a mentality of us when we're playing the piece. And again, like I said, I could go on, as I'm sure all of us could go on about this all day, but I'm going to unplug right there.
No, I really appreciate that, and just the things that you said. So thank you so much for that. Dr. Anderson, about, I guess, performance, or if you want to give your final thoughts as it relates to the recital.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Brock. Yeah, a lot of what Dr. Singleton was talking about, how to help these students to prepare. I do the same with my voice students. We sometimes work from the end of the piece backwards, so they'll know what's coming to the end, and it'll give them that sense of making it to the end of the piece. But yeah, it all really starts with what are we preparing day one? with the students for recitals. I love the whole idea of collaboration, trying to get my students to really get into that with doing duets from opera sings, things like that, just to give them a little bit to learn how to collaborate with more than just the pianist, right? Or allowing them to do some pieces with chamber, if you have strings. It's some beautiful African-American composed music out there that uses other instruments other than the piano, as well as some other music, but just to keep our students especially engaged of just not learning the standard repertoire. Yes, I want them to. Yes, I want them to present it, especially according to their level. But if they're at a good level that they can sing some of this 20th century type music that'll introduce them to singing music from African Americans, not just spirituals, we're talking about art songs, we're talking about full works that are out there, giving them that opportunity to do that. And giving them that exposure, that maybe it can open up some more, how would I say, some more interest for them. So even allowing them to introducing them to those composers like H. Leslie Adams and Jacqueline Hairston, those people, Florence Price, introducing them to them so that they can do some collaboration with other instruments, other strings. I know Dorothy Rudd Moore has some great things that I did as a student, as a DMA candidate, as a doctoral candidate. I did some great work with her, and I didn't even know this music existed when I was an undergrad. Like, I had no idea. All we sang was your Moses Hogan and your, things like that. So now allowing the students to introduce it to them so that they can put this on their recital. And not only they're exposing themselves, but they're exposing the community to this music as well. So, and other instrumentalists who might be playing maybe, who knows, Schumann, things like that, Chopin, piano music, and don't even realize that there are some wonderful works out here by African-American composers that they might collaborate with another vocalist and work on that and present it in a recital form. So, and also giving our students more than just options. And some of them, like I believe it was Dr. Singleton who said, some of them might not go into a career of opera. So I'm open to giving them something different, musical theater. Some of them might want to be on Broadway. So giving them music to prepare, that's musical theater they can add to their repertoire and use that for recital preparation as well. Gospel music. I am a huge fan of Richard Smallwood. It's very closely related to classical music, just because of his background, just because of what he learned at Howard University, using some of that music, pulling a small ensemble together and allowing that student to solo with that smaller ensemble, maybe not with the whole university choir, but just with that small, and adding that feature to a recital. I think now that we are in the 21st century, we need to be a little bit more flexible, not leaving tradition completely. We need that foundation. We need the 24 Italians. I still teach it. It's a lot of vocal instructors that are like shying away from it. And I'm like, no, still teach this stuff. It still helps their overall technique, but then moving them on to allowing them to know that they can use this technique for any genre of music that they want to sing. They might want to do vocal jazz. They might want to do a jazz piece with the jazz ensemble that's at that university. So just giving them the flexibility, teaching them the foundational things, and allowing them to blossom so that they can become in whatever area of the genre of music that they want to perform and be successful in. So I think the recital can be a huge part of that. It can be a catalyst. It can be somewhat of a launching pad to launch them into what exactly that they want to do and which form of music that they want to perform. So
I agree. Thank you so much. And just combining what you and Dr. Singleton said, just about, it's not always about, oh, well, this is not senior level repertoire and things like that. And I think that's the misconception we have sometimes, especially when we make the mistake of comparing our recital repertoire to that of other larger institutions or other conservatories. And that goes back to what Dr. Singleton has said the entire webinar about knowing your students, knowing what it is they want to do as their end result, and picking music that's appropriate for that, and not comparing it to a university that's thousands of miles away just because you like their repertoire or that's where you attended school. You have to know your students, know your community, and know the industry. You have to know and be willing to change with the industry and the demands of the industry today in order to best serve your students. Okay, we're getting ready to wrap up. I know I wanted to ask a small question and answer session. I know I wanted to give Professor Burkhead and Mr. Holden a chance to say their closing remarks. If you have any questions for any of our panelists, we're going to do a quick 2 to 3 minute question and answer session. The best way to do it is type your question into the chat so we can field all of the questions at one time. And while you're typing your questions into the chat, because we're at the end of this, I would like to ask Professor Burkhead first, followed by Professor Holden, if you would give your closing remarks.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me on today. This has been really good for me, just to hear my colleagues talk. Some of you I don't know, but just to hear you and to hear the things that you're teaching your students and just your concepts. Now, Daryl I know maybe best, and also Tamisha, but I've known Daryl since he was, I guess you were teaching at Grambling, and I saw you perform at the Stennis Space Center. And then the next time you brought your drum line over to Mississippi for like a competition we had. I was so impressed. And then we worked together for the consortium in Atlanta. Always been a huge fan of your pedagogy, just your concepts, and just your wisdom about things. So it's a pleasure to hear even more from you today. So from day one, like Dr. Anderson has said, you need to make sure that your curriculum, your syllabus has all the things that you expect the students to do. And not everybody's going to go in to be a classical musician. We turn out music educators at our school, and so undergrad you're going to be a band director. Okay, some people go on to graduate school and they major in performance. We're going to turn out some, but not very many at all. So we know what we're dealing with, and that's the product that we have. We do a lot of things here. It seems like you're a performance major, but with all the ensembles and all the things we do on each instrument. But we're a music education school, so we have to approach it at that level. So thank you for having me on.
Yes, thank you so much. And I definitely enjoyed my time. I took a few courses at Ole Miss, and so definitely it is a music education driven program there. So I definitely understand that. And yes, the recitals are approached a lot differently at Ole Miss as compared to other institutions that have the full gamut of, lots of performance and things like that. So thank you for joining us as well. Professor Holden, if you would give your closing remarks.
Hey, again, thank you for this opportunity. I didn't know I was going to be doing this, but however,
Surprise.
surprise, right? Yeah. But thank you again for the opportunity. I do want to say, when I was at Jackson State, we did have memorize our program, just like the piano student and the vocal student. So it was no different for us because our department chairman said, if the vocal people and the piano people, that's what she said, the vocal people and piano people had to memorize their music, all the wind players must memorize their music. So I memorized my whole recital that semester, my senior year. And one thing that happened to me on my program, I had 25 measures out. So what happened? Your mind just drift away. It just drift away. I had 25 measures out. And I was looking at the clock in the back. It was just that secondhand tick, tick, tick. In my head said, what note should I start on? That little devil said, start on F sharp. And I know F sharp was wrong. But based on my knowledge of improvisation and chromaticism, chromatic would work on anything. The hand said, da, 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 da. So I fell right back into the music itself. But that was a great moment for me during my memorizing my selection. But what I want to say is that utilizing the method books are very important because what you find in your method book, you will find in your solo pieces. You can always go back and say, oh, turn to page 175. Here's the same little passage. And what Dr. Singleton said about utilizing that pencil. Utilize that pencil, underline where the chromaticism, underline where the natural minor scale is located in your piece, the harmonic minor scale. Make sure they know all of that. The second thing is that make sure that all students purchase the music. Make sure they purchase music. Don't have no photocopy on stage. Purchase the music because you want to have some form of repertoire when you finish the school. So always purchase them. I hate Xerox and music. I don't Xerox. I don't print no music out for students. I said, you must purchase. I only print one sheet. That's it. And you on your own. Here's the whole list of things that you have to buy. They buy their music. The second thing is that make sure you study your music, study your scores, and also listen to some recordings. Only the recording just for the sound and the stylistic part of it, not for rhythm purposes. Don't listen to recording just for the rhythm, because some of the students now going to YouTube, and that's how they're learning the selections. You know, when I'm doing audition, the students sound great. They going through all of that. I say, how do you learn this? I went to YouTube. And when you give the music to sight read, it's totally just different. Like, wow, what happened? I went to YouTube for my solo piece. Oh, okay, now I know. No YouTube to listen to the music, only for stylistic and for the color of what you want to try to do for your recital. But again, hey, thank you for the opportunity. Here again, I can go on and on and on, but time does not allow for us to continue on. But thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. And again, I think Mr. Holden made some great points as well. Listening to recordings of the piece with stylistic things. Yes, not just relying on YouTube. Just like when you do a research paper, you don't want to rely on Wikipedia. You know, a lot of times those are opinions and not fact. Just like YouTube, the interpretation, they may have been under tempo. It may have been an abridged version of the solo that you have. So you want to make sure you're doing your research, because the recording you're listening to might be by a different arranger than the actual piece that you have or the solo that you have. Purchase your things, just because you, as a professional, you need to be building your own professional library anyway. But make sure that you start early, that you have the communications often. But as applied instructors, make sure that you're educating. Use every opportunity to educate your students about the importance of everything they're doing in their applied lessons, why the juries are important, why it's important to go on recital hour. Even if you're not completely prepared, getting up there, the more you prepare, the more it's going to help towards curbing your performance anxiety and stage fright. We talked about this before. Just knowing your piece through and through. And then I did a webinar before on overcoming performance anxiety and stage fright. Fall in love with your music. Fall in love with your music, or a strong like with your music. The more you like your music, the more you understand and spend time with your music, the better you're going to perform on your recital. So thank you all so much for joining in. Like I said, this was a mini webinar. We went slightly over time. I haven't seen any questions in the chat. This is going to be recorded and uploaded on YouTube. I see Dr. Lamont Lawhorn in the chat on Facebook. I appreciate him for being here, because he was one of the ones that mentioned some of these things in the performance anxiety and stage fright webinar, about practicing to get your heart rate up so that you're ready for that level of anxiety you'll have on stage. So run the stairs, run up and down the hall, and then practice so that you're used to that type of pressure. You can dial back from that. Practice cold. Walk in and just practice cold. We always teach warming up, but practice cold. That way you're always familiar. Go and start at different places in your music. I love starting from the end to the beginning, because you definitely want to finish strong. But something Dr. Singleton said that reminded me of what Dr. Lamont Lawhorn said. The transitions. We don't often practice the transitions between sections of our music. Make sure you practice those transitions over and over so that you're comfortable with those transitions, those modal changes, those key changes, those meter changes in your piece. Okay. So again, thank you so much for joining. We could go on and on and on. Stay tuned for more mini webinars, but I really appreciate you joining us here on Zoom or on Facebook Live. For more information, you can reach out to me at tlbrock@prodigiousmusic-concepts.org. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Prodigious Music Concepts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, PMC Professional Development Webinars. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Daryl Singleton, Professor Ricky Burkhead, Dr. Cordelia Anderson, Mr. James Holden, and Dr. Myron Brown for joining us as clinicians and panelists today. And I would like to thank you for joining and tuning in. Stay tuned for more upcoming events. Have a great day, everybody.